Good evening. This is Crime Classics. I am Thomas Hyland. Listen. The man in nondescript uniform dropping stones into that well is a mercenary soldier, more recently a deserter. He's testing the depth of the well, the only way he knows, since a length of rope is not immediately available, and more complicated machines are as yet undiscovered. This is the year 1778, and the deserter is named James Buchanan. Next to him is his friend, another deserter whose name is William Brooks. These men are in the employ of Mrs. Bathsheba Spooner of Brookfield, Massachusetts, whose well it is. Mrs. Spooner will pay these men immediately they deposit the body of her murdered husband, right down there. And tonight, my report to you on the crime of Bathsheba Spooner, the first woman to be tried for murder in the United States.
Crime Classics, a new series of true crime stories taken from the records and newspapers of every land, from every time. Your host each week, Mr. Thomas Hyland, connoisseur of crime, student of violence, and teller of murders. Now, once again, Thomas Hyland.
The place is Brookfield, Massachusetts, the year 1778. Scene, the home of Joshua and Bathsheba Spooner, a large and respectable dwelling, 2 stories in height, situated on the north side of the road from Brookfield to Worcester. In the front of it, and nearly opposite on the south side of the road, are stately elms and a well. And in the living room, there's this.
What manner of woman are you, Bathsheba? There's no content in you and no happiness.
And what happiness have you given me? A life that dies quickly, cooking and sewing, and from you, drunken sleep.
And you've not answered me. You would like to see me dead, would you not?
Listen to me, Joshua. When you returned this morning from Worcester, my heart sank in me. I'd hoped you wouldn't come back.
That I would have an accident. That in some way I would be killed.
Yes.
That you would be free then.
Yes.
To walk the town, newly widowed with a wandering eye.
Yes.
And you listen, shrew. I am your husband, and I'm your lover, and that's the way things are.
Old man! Old man! Ezra? Ezra?
I've been waiting. Bathsheba.
Wait.
No more waiting, Bathsheba. The time I was away from you with your husband in Worcester. The thinking about you.
And there'll be more waiting. Until it's done. Until you kill him.
I tried, but I could not.
He asked me a question, my husband did. What manner of woman are you, he asked. Now I wonder. What manner of woman am I to love such as you, a youth? A boy who pretends to manhood. You without the courage to...
The poison you gave me, there was no opportunity, Bathsheba.
And a boy who lies. Opportunity. When it becomes nighttime, my husband becomes a drunkard. You know that. To empty the poison in the cup when you were with him, a simple thing like that you couldn't do.
I swear it to you, Bathsheba. He'll die.
When? Go to him now. To the tavern where he is. Empty the poison.
I threw the poison away.
With no courage.
Bathsheba.
Speak my name and bedevil yourself with it.
Just kiss me, Bathsheba.
No kisses. No secret whisperings. None of that. No more. Until my husband is dead. Laugh then. You'll see I mean it.
There's a wench, Bathsheba, at the other end of town. And she watches me when I walk by.
Then go to her.
All right.
Wait. Don't leave me.
You almost let me go.
Boy, you...
Bathsheba.
Kill him. Kill my husband.
Later.
And that was Bathsheba Spooner. You've come to know her pretty well. You've seen her hating, you've seen her loving. There's more you should know. She was the sixth child of an illustrious man, General Ruggles. The general was a man of great wealth and lived in a style of unusual luxury for that day. He kept 30 horses and had a park of 20 acres for deer and a pack of hounds for the amusement of numerous visitors. He was a man intensely loyal to the British Crown and never hid his loyalties. And so, at the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, he was forced to give up his estate and to leave the country. His married life was also pretty bad, and he and his wife did not set a good example to his children in their conjugal relations. Bathsheba sprang from that kind of a household. Her loyalist background in time of war, and the very fact of the name she had, Bathsheba, were sufficient cause for the town in which she lived to view her with alarm. But keep this in mind. Bathsheba Spooner is going to murder her husband. How? Well, let's see how time and motive and circumstance conspire to get a man violently dead. The man, Joshua Spooner. Let's pick him up and see what he's doing. It's the same evening, and since it's after dark, he's drinking. And in Brookfield, there's only one public house in which to drink, Cooley's Tavern. And that's where he is.
Oh, no, Doctor.
Then what would you do?
To trap General Burgoyne, very simple. Hand me your tankard, Dr. King. Now, and here, this spoon, the line of march of Burgoyne. And your tankard and mine, 2 sections of the troops of General Washington. Now watch. And that's how we take care of General Burgoyne.
Yeah. Barkeep, more ale.
Joshua Spooner talks of strategies and drinks his ale. But mark this. Near the bar, another table. 2 men in nondescript uniforms, deserters from the army of General Burgoyne. Their names, James Buchanan and William Brooks. They've made known the fact that they've deserted the enemy, so their drinks are on the house and the appreciative customers. They're having a fine time.
Drink your ale, Will. Make me a toast and I'll drink with you.
And a toast you shall get. Burgoyne is a scurvy...
Louder, Will, louder, else we'll pay for our own ale.
Aye. A toast. Aye, I'll give you a toast to that scurvy, plump-bellied Burgoyne. May he rot in the wilderness.
That is, if he don't drown coming across the St. Lawrence.
Gentlemen.
And a merry evening to you.
Joshua Spooner is my name, and it would do me proud if you would permit me
Ale is what we're drinking, sir.
Ale for the Patriot!
And patriots we are, indeed, to goodness.
Oh, yes. We joined General Washington, sir, and his colonials. You should know that. And from here, we go to Worcester, where a column of Washington's hearties ale. To you, sir, and thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Willie, your tankard is dry, and so is mine.
If you will permit me, gentlemen, it would be my pleasure. My pleasure indeed.
It would be Mr. Spooner's pleasure indeed to buy the lads more ale, as was the custom. True, it was 1778, but the etiquette was the same. Nothing too good for our boys. And the deserters in Cooley's bar were off to join our boys. As a matter of fact, it was Mr. Spooner's pleasure to direct James Buchanan and William Brooks to Worcester to become soldiers in Washington's army. It just happened that one of the landmarks that Mr. Spooner gave the lads went something like this.
Now, mark you. A file of elms and a well. And across the road from it, my house. When you pass there, you'll be leaving Brookfield. And you will know you're on your way. We'll have another ale before you leave.
You're a gentleman if I ever met one.
Oh, a true one, James, my lad. A real gent.
So they touched tankards, the deserters and Joshua Spooner, and they made tearful farewell. And the deserters left and walked the road toward where the elms were, and a house, and a well. Let's go on ahead of them. Let's get back to the lady. Bathsheba is home. Bathsheba is fixing her hair. And the youth Ezra, he's tying into it night ribbons, a lover's tender gesture. Their talk, however, is shocking.
Perhaps you're right. Perhaps the best way is not to poison him.
I say shoot him.
Perhaps, in such a way as to make it appear as an accident. Will you shoot him, Ezra? Tightly with the ribbon, dear. Ezra?
I have not the courage for it.
But you know of guns and shooting. You were in the army for a year.
I marched. I shot no one. I marched upon an ambush and was wounded. Myself, I never pulled a trigger.
If not you to kill him, Ezra, then someone.
Yes. Turn from your mirror, Bathsheba, and look at me.
Oh, listen. Do you hear?
Yes. Drunkards.
Someone. Go to the window.
Drunkards. 2 of them by the moon. British deserters. I've seen them in town.
Call to them.
Bathsheba.
Call to them.
Hello! You there!
What do you want?
I'll talk to them.
A lady wants to talk to you.
A lady? At a lady's service any time.
Let them in, Ezra.
The Bathsheba Spooner who greeted the deserters must have been quite a sight. Tall, long hair, and blue ribbons. There must have been a fire in the fireplace, and in all probability she was standing in front of it. Her manner was gracious, and she was smiling. Ezra served the liquor. All in all, it was the nicest thing that could possibly have happened to 2 fellows who had deserted General Burgoyne.
And now, gentlemen, a question.
We bow. Bow, James, my lad. Say on, my lady.
How would you gentlemen like 500 pounds to see you on your long journey?
Merchant would warm the cockles, wouldn't it, Will?
Twould. Does that answer you, my lady?
And what would you do for it?
There is nothing that Will and I have not done, and for less handsome payment from less handsome women.
Far less.
Kill my husband.
This lad, the one you call Ezra.
Come here, lad. The next skinny ones don't take long for twisting.
Not him. Not Ezra.
Not him, James.
Then who?
My husband will return from his drinking. Will you wait for him? Kill him? When he returns, meet him outside at the door and greet him. Will you?
Not only for the money, dear lady, but for the pleasure of your presence to 2 tired soldiers. Right, James?
It's the truth.
You be the master of this house.
Huh? Yeah. And you are the 2...
That we be.
This one was a struggler, eh, Will?
Get the woman. And the one she calls Ezra.
Aye.
Mrs. Spooner, come see, it is done.
And a tidy job, if I say so myself, Mrs. Spooner.
And now he's dead.
What will you do with him?
There's a well across the road.
Aye. Give us a hand, James. And you, Ezra. There.
I'll walk with you.
It's a deep well.
Poor little man.
And that's how Joshua Spooner died. And that's how Bathsheba Spooner killed him.
You are listening to Crime Classics and your host, Thomas Hyland. Later this evening, the Lux Summer Theater stars Fred McMurray in a full-hour adaptation of the romantic mystery comedy The Lady and the Tumblers, an odd triangle composed of a beautiful girl, a suitcase full of explosive letters, and a murdered man will make The Lady and the Tumblers' most unusual dramatic fare. Listen to it on most of these same stations later this evening when CBS Radio presents the Lux Summer Theater. And now, once again, Thomas Hyland and the second act of Crime Classics and his report to you on the crime of Bathsheba Spooner.
Listen to this. It's awful and dread, this tale that I tell. Joshua Spooner lies dead in a well in Brookfield town in 78 from 6 stout whacks across the pate. Small poem by an anonymous contributor to the Worcester Spy, the local newspaper of the day. A change of scene now. Across the road from a cold well into a warm living room. Tableau, 4 people.
Mr. Spooner was such an elegant man. What will become of his clothes in his closet and his horse?
You may have them.
Come away from the window, Bathsheba. Here, to me, close.
The stars are dancing.
You're shivering. Are you cold?
No.
Will is very weary, Widow Spooner. We'll not go on to Worcester tonight.
Then wait till morning. You can make a place for yourselves in the barn.
But the money we'll have now, and the clothes and the horse.
Yes, all of it. Ezra,
Yes.
in the morning you will go to Cooley's Tavern. Inquire of Joshua. Tell them he's not been home. Tell them I'm frantic for his welfare.
Yes.
Good night, gentlemen. A very good night.
Mr. Cooley.
Aye? Hot grog on a nippy morning, Mr. Ross?
I've been sent to inquire of Joshua Spooner.
Who sent you?
The wife of him, Bathsheba.
Did she now? And why?
Last night he did not return home, and Mrs. Spooner is frantic for his welfare.
Not home? Well, he's not here. Last night he sat right there, my lad, and discussed military strategies with the doctor. Then, to the best of my knowledge, he went home.
Dr. King. Doctor, wake up. Please, Doctor, wake up. It's important.
What is it? What?
Where is Joshua Spooner?
Where is he?
Mr. Cooley says he sat with you last night.
As he did, then left me.
He's not home.
What?
Mrs. Spooner sent me to fetch him. She's troubled that he's not returned.
But where else could he have gone if not to his wife?
We must find him, Doctor.
Yes, by all means.
Ezra did that very well, with the precise shading of alarm in his voice, the concern. A man on an errand for a troubled lady. Everybody was impressed. Mr. Cooley closed his bar. Dr. King appealed to the neighborliness of the other customers, and everybody went looking for Joshua Spooner. Immediately, they called on Mrs. Spooner, whom they found in the greatest apparent distress. Upon an examination of the premises, in the neighborhood of the doorstep, they observed the tracks of several persons on the snow. And on further search, they found Mr. Spooner. You know where. In the well. So far, only horror and suspicions. But now, let's pick up Willie and James. They haven't left Brookfield. Stupid of them, isn't it? But then you've got to examine it from their point of view. Why become soldiers in Washington's army, especially in the winter, and suffer the privations of the military, when they could be warm and rich as a civilian? So, imagine it. 2 tatterdemalion deserters, suddenly elegant, in Mr. Spooner's clothes, which were somewhat tight-fitting. But elegance and tight-fitting are somehow akin. Now, there lived in Brookfield a certain wench whose name is lost in history. This much is known about her. She had an eye for tight elegance. This much is known about her, too, that she went riding with Willie and James on their newly acquired horse.
I'll help you down.
Now, James? No.
Give us a bus, dearie. That's a dearie.
Will,
Aye.
how is it we are riding Mr. Spooner's horse?
Why, dearie, we don't know a Mr. Spooner.
Aren't these Mr. Spooner's silver buckles?
No.
Aren't you wearing his clothes?
These are our clothes, dearie. Come, let's ride some more. It brings the pink to your pretty cheeks.
But the cat was out of the bag. The girl told her mother, and her mother her father. And it so happened that her father was at that moment on his way to look for the murderers of Joshua Spooner. So the father told some neighbors, and they located James and Willie, brought them all together. The two deserters, Ezra and Bathsheba. And this is what happened.
The jurors for the government and people of Massachusetts Bay in New England, upon their oath, present that William Brooks and James Buchanan and Ezra Ross in the county of Essex, not having God before their eyes, an assault did make upon Joshua Spooner, feloniously, willfully, and of their malice aforethought, on the first day of March last past, with force and arms, also by striking, beating, and kicking aforesaid Joshua Spooner, so as to inflict several mortal bruises, of which Joshua Spooner died. And that Bathsheba Spooner, widow and late wife of Joshua Spooner, being seduced by the instigation of the devil, did incite, move, abet, counsel, and procure the murder of aforesaid Joshua Spooner. How do you plead?
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
What statement have you, Bathsheba Spooner?
I am the wife of the deceased. If what you accuse me of be true, what end could the death of my husband serve? Were there any reasons, persuading, hopes, inviting, or advantages arising from the death of my husband? By depriving myself of husband, I would subject myself to the burdens of a widow. If I hated my husband, as such has been said, could I not have separated from him, gone to my father or to my brothers? What foolishness is this to say I've loved Ezra Ross, when one of my station might have any gallant I please? Gentlemen, if I be guilty, I was not of sound mind.
To the sheriff of our county of Essex, greetings. We command you that on Thursday, the 4th day of June next, between the hours of 12 and 4 of the clock in the afternoon, you cause William Brooks, James Buchanan, Ezra Ross, and Bathsheba Spooner to be conveyed from our jail, where they are now in your custody, to the usual place of execution, and there to be hanged by the neck until their bodies be dead.
The motive, the crime, and the sentence. Justice was simple. And quickly, too quickly for the four prisoners, the 4th day of June. This is a copy of the Worcester Spy dated that day that I have here. I'd like to read from it. It was about 2:30 of the clock in the afternoon when the four criminals were brought out of prison and conducted to the place of execution under a guard of 100 men. The three men went on foot. Mrs. Spooner was carried in a chaise, being then, as she had been for several days, exceedingly feeble. The procession was regular and solemn. Just before they reached the place of execution, one of the most terrific thunderstorms that had occurred within the memory of the oldest inhabitant darkened the heavens. There followed an awful time. The loud shouts of the officers amidst a crowd of 5,000 people. The horses pressing upon those in front. The shrieks of the women in the tumult and confusion. The malefactors slowly advancing to the fatal tree, preceded by the dismal coffins. The fierce coruscations of the lightning athwart the darkened horizon, quickly followed by loud peals of thunder, conspired together and produced a dreadful scene of horror. It seemed as if the author of nature had added such terrors to the punishment of the criminals as might soften the stoutest heart of the most obdurate and abandoned. At length, the place of execution having been reached, Ross, Buchanan, and Brooks ascended the ladder to the stage.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Ross made an audible prayer. The other two were engaged in silent devotions until they faced the noose. Mrs. Spooner, as she approached the tree, was seen to bow gracefully to many of the spectators with whom she had been acquainted. Then she crept up the ladder on her hands and knees. When the eyes of the malefactors were covered and all was ready, Mrs. Spooner took the sheriff by the hand. And for the first time, Bathsheba Spooner accepted the verdict of justice.
My dear sir, I am ready. In a little time, I expect to be in bliss. And but a few years must elapse when I hope I shall see you and my other friends again.
And that's the way the newspaper recorded it. This has been my report of the crime of Bathsheba Spooner, the first woman tried and executed for murder in the United States.
In just a moment, Thomas Hyland will tell you about next week's Crime Classic. The National Blood Program has been made part of the Department of Defense. That's how vital a continuing growing stockpile is against emergencies of war or peace. In the warm weather months, donations fall off. In the first week of June alone, donations dropped 20%. This must be offset immediately. Before you go away, please phone the Red Cross for an appointment to give a pint of blood. You will enjoy your vacation more for having done it. And here again is Thomas Hyland.
Next week, we'll be with you at the same time, although geography and year will change. The place? Pimlico, England. The year, 1879. My report? On the shockingly peaceful passing of Thomas Edwin Bartlett, greengrocer. Thank you. Good night.
Bathsheba Spooner, tonight's crime classic, was adapted from the original court reports and newspaper accounts by Morton Fine and David Friedkin. The music was composed and conducted by Bernard Herrmann, and the program was produced and directed by Elliott Lewis. Thomas Hyland is portrayed on radio by Lou Merrill. Bathsheba Spooner was played by Mary Jane Croft. The cast included Herb Butterfield, Sam Edwards, William Johnstone, Georgia Ellis, Tudor Owen, and Ben Wright. Bob Lamont speaking.
Good evening. This is Crime Classics. I am Thomas Hyland. Listen. The man you hear breathing is named Thomas Edwin Bartlett. He is in bed and sleeping, breathing deep the night air of Pimlico, England. Mr. Bartlett is a heavy sleeper. A deep breather, too, rhythmical and serene. An almost lullaby quality for young Mrs. Adelaide Bartlett, his wife, who this night sleeps at the foot of his bed. Rhythmical, serene. And just at the stroke of midnight, just when a new year has begun, Mr. Bartlett stops breathing. Mr. Bartlett has just died from having drunk too much chloroform, of all things. His wife wakens, sees it is a new year, and celebrates. Tonight, my report to you on the shockingly peaceful passing of Thomas Edwin Bartlett, greengrocer.
Crime Classics, a new series of true crime stories taken from the records and newspapers of every land, from every time. Your host each week, Mr. Thomas Hyland, connoisseur of crime, student of violence, and teller of murders. Now, once again, Thomas Hyland.
When you heard Mr. Bartlett die, it was New Year's Eve in the year 1885. Some years before this, one springtime, when Mr. Bartlett was breathing 100% perfect, he had responded to the delicate scent of a young French girl, and the aroma went right to his heart. He was suddenly in love with Adelaide Blanche de la Tremoise, age 16.
Adelaide! Adelaide! Stop skipping rope. I'm talking to you.
You made me miss Zoot.
You shouldn't say zoot, my dear. It's an immodest expression.
Zoot, 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 zoot.
I'm sorry I made you miss. I apologize.
I accept. And now will you do something for me?
Anything.
Of this you are sure?
Anything, I swear it.
Bon. Take this rope and tie an end of it to the tree. And hold the other end and turn it. And I will jump.
Don't you ever get enough of the sport?
Zoot, tie the rope.
Very well. Adelaide,
Oui?
do you like me?
Oh, very much. However,
What?
you puzzle me.
Intrigue you, you mean? I'm glad.
Puzzle me. Why you put the sign, gone to fish on your grocery store this last 2 weeks, when it is not so. You are here every afternoon in my yard when I come home from school.
I have permission from your brother. Adelaide.
You have finished tying the rope?
Yes.
S'il vous plaît, turn it. Faster! Faster! Faster!
Oh, my dear. Adelaide, are you hurt? Here, I lift you.
Yes, yes, help me. I'm so tangled in the rope.
Adelaide.
Oh, you are very nice.
Adelaide, listen.
I like your beard, a black beard. Barbe noire, barbe noire, barbe noire.
Oh, Adelaide, my dear, will you marry me?
Marry you?
Yes.
But I am still in school.
Marry me, and it'll be the same. You'll still go to school.
And you will help me with my lessons.
Every night.
And you'll play games with me and jump rope with me.
I want to.
I will turn and you will jump. Now.
Now?
Now.
All right. Adelaide,
Oui?
will you marry me?
But of course, Monsieur Barbe Noire.
Adelaide.
Oui?
Turn the rope faster. Faster! Faster!
Passion in Pimlico. Participants, Thomas Edwin Bartlett and Adelaide Blanche de la Tremoise, and a good quality skipping rope, which latter, it might be mentioned, came from the shelves of Mr. Bartlett's grocery store, and which, coiled neatly, was his first gift to her. It was a springtime romance and an honorable one. They got married. And according to Mr. Bartlett's word, the marriage progressed to each one's satisfaction. Mr. Bartlett continued at the grocery store, and Adelaide was still a student. It is a matter of record that she was a good student in the subjects of geography, history, and botany. But it is also a matter of record that one day she brought home with her a note from her teacher.
Dear Mr. Bartlett, here is your wife's last examination paper in algebra. As you see, the grade is 43. Her square roots are especially weak, as are her solving equations with two unknowns. Something must be done, else your spouse will not pass into the next form. Sincerely, Edgar Becker, Esquire. P.S. I will be glad to tutor your spouse after school hours. Signed, E.B. Esquire. Oh, Adelaide, why are you crying?
I am not a good wife.
You are wrong, my dear. I am not a good husband. I should have been helping you with your algebra.
But you help me so much with my lessons. And you get tired and you go to your room and sleep. Oh, husband.
Yes?
I do not wish it anymore. I do not wish school.
I want your school and Mr. Becker to be proud of you.
No.
My dear, what's the matter?
I do not wish to be a schoolgirl wife, but a woman wife, a mother wife.
You're so young.
Listen to me.
A grade of 43 is nothing to fret over. By my cousin Sybil from Nottingham received 23 on her...
Listen to me.
No, child. You listen to me. I've failed you. I've made you ashamed of yourself. And now I'll make amends.
How?
I will find you a tutor.
A tutor?
But not Mr. Becker.
Husband.
Yes, child.
Whatever you say.
Trouble in Pimlico. Simply this. The girl wanted to grow up, and her husband wouldn't let her. He told her she'd grow up soon enough, but right now she should play and run and scamper. This period in the married life of Thomas and Adelaide was marked by two events. The first, his presenting her upon her birthday with a game of the mind, domino, hand-carved, imported from Persia. The second, a tutor, a veritable quiz in algebra, imported from Bristol. A young man of 21, accomplished in the 3 R's and other branches of learning. He doted on chemistry, for instance, and one report has it that he was forever indulging himself with practical jokes at the school, with chloroform. They say his headmaster constantly fell asleep while admonishing him. His name?
George Dyson, Adelaide, your tutor. This is my wife, Adelaide.
At your service.
Here is your book. Open it to page 1. A minus 1 equals 0. Therefore, A equals 1. Do you understand that?
No.
Sit by me. I'll teach you.
I'll leave you two alone.
Now.
Mr. Dyson.
Yes?
You are very young.
You are very pretty.
Tutor me.
Since the minus quality of 1 changes to a positive quality as you transpose the integer to the right side of the equation mark, it is obvious then if x minus 1 equals 0, then x is equal to 1.
Quite obvious indeed. You are a very good tutor.
Did your husband tell you I was to live here?
Yes, he did.
If x minus 2 is equal to 0, what does x equal?
2.
I'm proud of you.
Examination time came around, and Adelaide was at the head of her class.
A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared.
In the next form, she shone. Algebra was her strongest subject. One day, Mr. Becker was astounded when Adelaide stood right up in class and said,
The cube root of a cube minus 3a squared b plus 3ab squared minus b cubed is a minus b.
Then came geometry. George was also a whiz at this. More so.
George, cher tutor.
Stop that. Pay attention to your lesson.
George, please.
Please what?
Please kiss me.
First, the theorem.
Two triangles are congruent when the two sides and the included angle are coincident. Please kiss me.
All right.
How do I earn my next kiss?
Mathematics in Pimlico. On to trigonometry and the youth. Wife and tutor caught up in the mysteries of logarithms and sines and cotangents and secants. There were field trips, too, to the garden, because George Dyson Tutor believed in practical application of theory. This particular late afternoon, they were endeavoring to determine the height of the flagpole in the garden, using the length and angle of the shadow cast by the pole as points of reference. It was a fine afternoon in the fall. It was an afternoon to be young.
Kiss me.
You always ask me to do that, Adelaide.
And you always do. Kiss me.
Now, suppose your husband should walk out here and see us.
He knows about us.
You're joking.
Oh, I'm not. He knows.
Surely.
Oh, do not worry. He's... Kiss me.
All right.
What a lovely picture. What a lovely, awesome picture.
Mr. Bartlett.
Of course, kiss her, Mr. Dyson. You deserve it. You both deserve it. Master and pupil. You've done so well together. Go on, Dyson.
Sir.
Kiss her. Go on. Kiss her.
Oh, yes.
Bravo, bravo. How's trigonometry coming, Dyson?
Fine.
Fine. Well, cook said dinner will be ready soon. I'll call you when it is.
Adelaide.
What?
Don't you find your husband...
He's a bore.
But I mean, strange. What happened just now?
He is a bore, and I despise him.
He's your husband. You shouldn't speak like that about him.
I'm sorry he's my husband.
What would you do if he weren't?
You know.
I know. But I want you to tell me.
The things we talked about. If he weren't my husband.
I want to tell you something about me you didn't know, Adelaide.
Oh, please do.
I was quite a chemistry student, too. I could teach chemistry if I wanted to.
That is very interesting.
Chloroform, for instance, is a chemical.
Chloroform? I've heard of it.
It belongs to the class of neurotic chemicals which act on the brain and produce loss of sensation.
Can it cause death?
Carelessly used, it can cause death.
Then it is a poison.
Let's stroll in the garden.
I want to.
Chloroform is a colorless, heavy, and volatile liquid, having a peculiar ethereal odor which cannot be
hand in hand into the sunset, and they spoke of many things: husbands, autumn roses, cabbages, kings, and chloroform, which is a very deadly poison. a quality which some malcontents have attributed to the quality of the dust in the Pimlico air. However, it's well known that the major divertisement among Pimlicans is walking into the local sunset and making plans. So, as not to defy custom, so walked Adelaide and her tutor George.
You're very dear to me, Adelaide.
Oh, this I know, but it is not the time to speak of it. We were speaking of other things.
I used to have fun with chloroform when I went to school.
Is it difficult to obtain?
In large quantities, it is. However,
what?
it can be obtained. But there's a difficulty.
Oh?
It has a peculiar odor. It's easily detectable. It's almost impossible to get someone to drink it.
Unless someone wanted to drink it.
Who would want to?
Some people, I suppose.
Adelaide.
Yes, George.
I've noticed something about your husband. He looks poorly.
He suffers. Sometimes at night he comes to my bedroom and tells me how much he suffers.
From what?
He's bilious.
Oh, poor man.
He complains of his stomach.
I thought perhaps that was it.
And nervous depression. At night sometimes he sits in my room, depressed.
His stomach.
And the doctors have told him that.
Has he tried mercury?
Mercury?
Much easier to obtain than chloroform. I could stop at the apothecary's after dinner.
Do stop. His stomach is much worse after dinner.
I'm hungry. Let us to dinner, Adelaide.
Oh, give me your arms, dear George.
The maidservant was just setting the suckling pig on the table when the young folk entered. Mr. Bartlett greeted them with a wave of his fork, and they sat. The dinner was a success, and as usual, Mr. Bartlett exhibited his clean plate for the applause of his wife and her tutor. Over fruit and cheese, George Dyson begged to be excused.
I'll be back in a shake, Mr. Bartlett, with a surprise for you.
Slice another melon for me, dear Adelaide.
And in half an hour, George returned, which was good time for the course, the house to the apothecary and back. But George was in a hurry, and when he returned, Adelaide was waiting for him in the great hall.
Quickly, come.
What's the matter?
After dinner, he almost fainted. He managed to get into the library where he's lying down.
His stomach?
In the middle of a melon slice.
Oh, Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Bartlett, here, I have something for you.
What? What is it?
Here now. Let me help you sit up. Adelaide, that wine glass.
Yes.
I have something for you, Mr. Bartlett. Something that will make you feel better.
What is it?
The surprise I promised you. To make your stomach feel much better.
George was very good in chemistry at school.
You're a good fellow, George.
Drink it.
Hot stuff. Here, I can't drink any more.
Well, I'll leave it here beside you. Sip it when you can. You'll see that when you develop a taste for it, it will be very beneficial.
You're a good fellow. Adelaide,
Yes.
Don't worry about me. You have your things to do.
Yes. George and I have our lessons.
I wouldn't interrupt them for the world. Go, George. Adelaide.
We'll look in on you later, Mr. Bartlett. In an hour.
Good fellow. Good fellow.
Mr. Bartlett's stomach quieted after a while, and lying there, he had a thought that perhaps it was George's surprise that did it. So he forced himself to sip again of the glass. However, in time, Mr. Bartlett did develop a taste for mercury and made it a habit to indulge in a sip after every meal. Somehow, his stomach responded suitably, and his complaints were not nearly so many. Of course, it should be noted that Mr. Bartlett would reel suddenly and fall down at odd times, and then he was constantly bumping into things, and his teeth dropped out. Some of his more observant friends would mutter among themselves about Mr. Bartlett's slightly bluish complexion. One morning, Mr. Bartlett woke up completely beardless, and from that day on he never had to shave. But since generally his stomach felt much better, Mr. Bartlett deemed himself ahead of the game. A philosophy which caused comment. Adelaide to George.
My husband seems happier.
Yes, I've noticed.
His stomach has improved
Because he doesn't eat so much.
because he lacks sufficient teeth.
Your husband has developed a tolerance for mercury.
Yes. Mr. Dyson,
Mr. Dyson? You mean George?
when will you be finished tutoring me, Mr. Dyson?
What do you mean?
Tomorrow, I should think, Mr. Dyson.
What?
Tomorrow is the eve of the New Year. My husband has asked me to join him in private celebration in his rooms. We shall drink to your leaving us.
But you and I...
But there's one last favor you can do for me.
Why, I'd do anything.
While you're at the apothecary.
Apothecary?
While you're there, while you're making the purchase of chloroform, bring me 1 sachet of lavender, a dozen cinnamon sticks, and a dozen licorice twisties for my husband.
Then you are giving me one more chance, Adelaide.
Mr. Dyson, happy is the day when I shall call you George again.
Lavender, cinnamon sticks, chloroform, and licorice twisted.
2 dozen twisties, Mr. Dyson. Good night.
It's 11 o'clock, Adelaide.
1 hour until the New Year and our anniversary. 6 years. Thomas,
Yes, my dear.
you remember how you used to come and watch me jump rope?
I had a beard then.
And I called you Barbois.
A drink.
6 years, Thomas, we have been married.
A drink.
I have had enough drink. You finish the bottle. I want you to look at me, husband.
Very well. Yes.
When we were married, I was 16, a child, 6 years ago.
Adelaide.
You see, husband?
No longer a child. I drink to you, a woman. Adelaide,
What is it?
have you drunk from this bottle?
Yes, I think so.
It has a pungency to it, doesn't it? Let me see. Chantilly, 1871. Must have been a strange vintage. A decided pungency. An aroma, too. Smell it.
My, good.
What is it? Lovely?
It tassels from your nightcap. It tickles.
Does it?
Drink makes you so attractive, dear Thomas.
Makes me attractive, huh? Tell cook to order a magnum.
Oh, later. Finish the bottle, dear, and then I have something to tell you.
All right. Now, what is it you have to tell me?
Oh, you confess it now, do you not, that I am a woman? An attractive woman, yes. And finally a wife, my husband. 6 years now, and you have observed me only as a child and have treated me as...
On further passage between them on this, their 6th New Year's Eve together, and their wedding anniversary, on further passage, history is obscure. It is known, however, that they were alone in the house, except for their servant. It is known, too, that 5 bottles of champagne were consumed. 2 bottles Chantilly 1871, a pungent vintage. According to the record, it has been said that a few moments before the new year was ushered in, Mr. and Mrs. Bartlett were both asleep. He stretched across the width of the bed, she at his feet. And once more, I refer you to Mr. Bartlett asleep, rhythmically, serene.
Thomas? Thomas?
Mr. Bartlett was dead. That didn't do any good. It was another year, but not for Mr. Bartlett. For Mr. Bartlett, a post-mortem examination. For his stomach, evidence of having contained a considerable amount of chloroform. So there was a coroner's inquiry. And there was a verdict of willful murder against Adelaide Bartlett and George Dyson. At the trial, each made a statement protesting their innocence.
Yes, it is true that I purchased chloroform at various apothecaries, and it is true that the total amount I purchased thereby was sufficient to cause death. However, I used the chemical merely to clean spots from my clothing. I have many pieces of clothing and believe neatness is next to righteousness. It is true also that I became attached to Mrs. Bartlett, but only because she was well versed in matters mathematical. It was a constant source of joy to me to be able to sit and speak with her of an evening of theorems and theories and postulates and corollaries.
I loved my husband. He encouraged me to pursue studies of various kinds and decided to please him. On the night of his death, my husband was in good spirits and drank heavily. He, I must confess, was never more attractive. But he fell asleep, a deep sleep. From this he never awakened. I never know why.
Nor does anyone else know why. The jury debated for 2 hours and returned a verdict of not guilty. History at this point again becomes obscure. It is not known whether George or Adelaide ever saw each other again, whether they ever again tasted together the dusty fruits of a Pimlico sunset, whether there were any more math lessons or talks of matters chemical. But it may be safe to assume that some of the dust breathed by the Pimlicans on evening walks, some of it has been contributed by George and Adelaide and Mr. Bartlett. You might be interested in knowing where once stood Mr. Bartlett's grocery store, now stands an apothecary. This is all the information I have. Thank you. Good night.
Thomas Edwin Bartlett, tonight's crime classic, was adapted from the original court reports and newspaper accounts by Morton Fine and David Friedkin. The music was composed and conducted by Bernard Herrmann, and the program is produced and directed by Elliott Lewis. Thomas Hyland is portrayed on radio by Lou Merrill. Thomas Edwin Bartlett was played by Herb Butterfield, Adelaide by Betty Harford, and George by Terry Kilburn. Bob Lamont speaking.